All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, YAHAWASHI, Bahashem, Kakadash. Throw my honors unto the apostles and the elder, the GMS, who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers. And peace and blessing, salutation to the hopeful elect out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh, Bahashem, YAHAWASHI. Pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures to faith in Yahweh Bashim Al Shah. All right, and what I want to get into this morning, is dealing with suffering with Yahweh Shah. Okay, suffering with Yahweh Shah. Okay, because we know, all right, as Yahweh Shah came into the earth, all right, he was coming, to suffer. He was coming to teach, and he was coming to go through a suffering. All right, and that suffering perfected him. Okay, and we are going through the same process. See, that's what it means to follow Yahweh Shah whithersoever he goeth. Okay, because he's not physically here. Okay, well, we're following him around everywhere as the disciples did. When he was physically here. Okay, they follow him whithersoever he went. Okay, they was with him all the time. Okay, but now we follow him in the spirit whithersoever the spirit of Yahweh Shai leads us, man. And the spirit of Yahweh Shai leads us into particular sufferings, and we have to understand that. And that's us suffering with him. That's us enduring with him. That's us drinking of that cup that he drunk of, all right, so we can be perfected, so we can get back to that glory. You see, there's a suffering, before the glory, okay? And that suffering, all right, it sucks, man. Ain't no easy way around it, but it's necessary. That's the bitters, the spirit been dealing with, dealing with the bitters. Well, there's aspects of the truth that's bitterness, man, and at times it gets extremely intense. Okay, the bitterness of suffering with Yahweh Shai, okay, whether there's glory on the other end of that suffering, okay, and that's why, matter of fact, let's start there here. One of my favorite precepts, Hebrews 12 and 2, it says, looking unto Yahweh Shai, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him. So you have to look beyond the suffering. Okay? You have to understand that the Lord has a goal in mind. And the Lord doesn't have us suffering for nothing. Okay? The Lord is purging us, man. There's certain flaws and flaws and unwanted qualities that the Lord is removing from us, and the only way that they can be removed if he put us in the furnace, man. All right? And at certain times, that furnace is way hotter than other times, man. But we have to endure whatever it is. And the Lord gives us the tools to endure whatever affliction he put us through. And that's another thing. It puts us in the spirit to utilize the spiritual tools that we have, man. To apply patience. Okay? How do you know if you're patient how do we know if we're patient until we put in a situation where we have to be patient? How do we know we trust Yahweh Shem Al Shai until we put in a situation where we have to trust Yahweh Shem Al Shai? Okay? How do we know, all right, that we're obedient till we put in a situation when we have to be obedient even when it don't feel good, man? Okay? So the true test comes from the infliction, the endurance, So Yahweh Shai endured the cross because of the joy that was set before him. Okay? And that's one of the things that help us endure is to understand that there's a joy that's beyond the suffering, man. This is only temporal. Okay? And the Lord ain't putting us through things, all right, to break us. He's putting us through things to make us, if we're of the elect. Okay? If you're 2/3, you're going to be broken by the affliction. Okay? But if we're part of the hopeful elect, we're being made by this affliction. Okay? So when you read on and it says, looking unto Yahweh Shai, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of the Most High. And there's a level of shame, we have to go through, because, the easy thing, all right, because there's always the straight gate, and then there's always, the broad gate in our day-to-day situation. The straight gate, you're going to take a little shame, You have to turn the cheek at certain situations, man. Okay? You have to suffer. You got to be patient. You're going to have to wait on the judgment of the Lord to kick in. Okay? King David had that. He had to wait on the judgment of the Lord. He had to keep turning the cheek with Saul and wait on the judgment of the Lord. Okay? You think, and then and best believe, because when you're in that furnace, the thing is not to spaz out, because when you're in that furnace, because it's very intense, and there's always, this main antagonist, okay, character, all right, that we deal with when we, in that furnace, man, and that character make you want to spaz out every second of the day. You see, you best believe King David wanted to spaz out on Saul, man, but he knew order, okay, and he knew that, hey, it's the judgment of the Lord. The Lord got to intervene. That was above King David pay grade to put King Saul to death. That he didn't have the green light to do that. Okay, so we be in situations, and you know that furnace will get intense, because when you in the furnace, man, like, just the thought of what you going through can be heavy. Just the thought of what you're going through can be heavy, and you have this main character, this antagonist, that's steady poking at you while you in the furnace, or it can be multiple people, okay, just poking at you while you in the furnace, and it's a fight, just not to spaz out and lose it, man. Okay, so going here, but that's part of suffering with YAHAWASHI, because YAHAWASHI went through that. Remember, he had a whole nation of antagonists, man. Let's get this word antagonist. All right. Yeah, he had niggas from everywhere. Like I say, you had Jake that didn't get along. All right, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Herodians, the scribes. Okay, the Pharisees. You see, they didn't even get along. Okay, but they all came together just to be antagonists against Yahawashi, his ministry, man. And he had to deal with them niggas, man. The Heavenly Father had Yahawashi in the furnace, and then he still had that ultimate suffering of the crucifixion at the end, okay, of having to suffer with these niggas, man, trying to trip them up, trying to cause confusion, you know, trying to make him to be this revolutionary, this revolutionary, and you know, paint him in a certain light, trying to accuse him and dry snitch on him to Rome. And he had to go through these things daily, man. Plus all the good. Remember, he was doing all this good. He was healing, he was doing miracles. He was teaching. He was breaking things down daily. He was doing all this good, but he still had to suffer, man. Because that's when we truly being tested, when we're being obedient in the midst of the affliction. That's when the true test is at hand, man. Okay? So let's get this word antagonist. All right. So you get this word antagonist. It says antagonist, a person who actively opposes or is hostile to someone or something, an adversary, man. So the Lord always has certain antagonists around us. All right. There's a resistance to our progress. But the thing is, resistance builds strength. Okay, so we gotta go through the resistance, but we gotta go through it in order, in obedience. Okay, Yahushua, he went through that resistance, but he went through it in obedience. Okay, you have to remember he was obedient unto the cross. Okay, because remember, Yahushua said, I could call legions down. That would have been the easy way. He could have called legions and could have destroyed the whole Roman Empire. Okay, but that would have been the easy way. He wouldn't have been perfected through suffering. That's why he told Peter, when Peter was trying to stop him from going through with it, he cursed Peter out and said, look, get thee behind me, Satan. Because Yahushua knew he had to go through that process, man, of suffering to be perfected. And we are in the same situation. We're drinking of that cup. You know, everybody, wants to partake in the glory. We talk about the kingdom and how it's going to be, and the infrastructure, and the servants and this and that. But then we can't. Before we get to that point, there's a suffering, and we can't get around it. We gotta go through that suffering to get to that glory, man. Okay. And that's part of the joy that was set before Yahawashi, that everybody, all right, the first fruit, his brethren that was with him from the beginning, okay, the elect, they were predestined to believe, okay. The joy that was set before Yahawashi, that encouraged him to go through the suffering because he understood that it wasn't only going to be a win from him. For him, it was going to be a win for his brethren and the believers, man. And then eventually the rest of Israel, man. Okay? So when you go here, let's get this. Because see, the Satan wins, all right, when we be disobedient in the situation, you know? So we have to understand the Lord allows Satan to jump on particular people, okay, around us, okay, to, to force us to get out of character, to force us to be disobedient. And that's when Satan wins, okay? So we have to remember this is spiritual warfare, okay? This is not, when the scriptures say we're not warring with flesh and blood, there's spirit on particular people, all right? Their whole goal, objective, is to get us out of character and be disobedient, man, okay? So we have to remember that, like Jake in the world, say don't let a nigga trick you out your spot. Well, that's what Satan does with the believers. His whole thing is to try to trick us out our spot, man. To push buttons and play with our emotions, and But the thing is, we gotta embrace the situation, man. All right, Yahawashi did when you go to the book of Luke, chapter 22. Yahawashi, he just had to embrace the situation because he was in the flesh. He wanted another way. He understood what he had to go through. All right, then what he was already going through, he wanted another way. Okay, but then he just had to embrace the situation and go through with it, man. All right, and we can't expect for it to be fair. It's not gonna be fair. Okay, it's not gonna be fair when we're in the furnace, man. Okay, but the thing is, we can't play the victim because the Lord is dealing. You see, because when you play the victim, you stop looking inwardly and you start putting the blame on everything that's around us, man. Okay? So if we play the victim, we stunt our growth. And we don't see what the Lord is trying to show us whenever we play victim in these situations. Like, nah, you got to be proactive and you got to embrace it, because that's when, just me personally, man, that's when the suffering became easier when I started changing how I move. When I started changing how I thought, my perspective, how I do things, when then I just submitted to the situation, like this just the will of the Lord. All right. I just gotta submit to the situation, the circumstances, and deal according to the spirit. Okay. So when you go to Luke 22 and 39, it says, and he came out and went as he was wont. I read this in the NLT, and this is dealing with Yahawashi right before he, is getting ready to be crucified. So this is Luke 22 and 39. Then accompanied by the disciples, Yahawashi left the upstairs room and went as usual to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, pray that you would not give in to temptation. Okay, and temptation is a trial. So before he left, he was praying to them not to give in to temptation because hey, he was going through it. So he's telling them, pray not to give into these trials, man. Because the trial wants you to tap out. Satan is trying to get you to tap out. Okay? When you go to is that in we go back to that. Because we need to get that word sift. Alright. Desire might be in John. Alright, but I want to get that word sift. In the, yeah, okay, it was in the same chapter, right? Book. Alright, this is Luke 22 and 31. It says, and the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan have desired, all right, to have you that he may sift you as wheat. Okay? Now, you go into the word sift in the Greek.
46:17, Seniazo.
Seniazo. Now, it says to sift to shake and they see, and this the point. It says by inward agitation to try one's faith to the verge of overthrow. You know, and that's why it's working. It's working in us because it's an inward agitation. When we in that furnace, it's a inward agitation that you just can't shake, and the only way to shake it is to go through it. So Satan, the Lord allows Satan to get on certain people, certain situations. Whether it's your job, your family, whatever situation, a bodily ailment, a dis-ease, whatever it might be. Well, Satan works through many avenues to sift. It might be multiple things at the same time. Okay, but Satan, his whole agenda is to sift, is to agitate you to the point to overthrow your faith, man. To make it seem, well, this ain't worth it. What I'm going through now ain't worth it, man. And is that's why we have to have a solid understanding on what we believe. Because there's nothing that we can go through, no type of suffering we can go through, okay, that can compare to the reward that we got. And we have to understand too, the bigger the suffering, the greater the reward. We serve a just power. That's why YAHAWASHI went through all this suffering, because he had the greatest reward out of everybody. In existence, YAHAWASHI has the greatest reward in existence, man. So that's why the scriptures say he was marred more than any man. When we speak about how the Romans disfigured YAHAWASHI during the crucifixion, okay? So he had to go through that. He had to be marred more than any man, because he's going to be blessed more than any man. So you have to remember also, the greater the suffering, the greater the blessing on the other side. You know, you look at our forefathers, what they went through. They went through some heavy things, but they finna come into some heavy blessings, man. Okay? These men that we read about, like the status that the Lord finna give them in the earth forever, and it's gonna be forever. Okay? And women, there's certain things you gotta suffer too, because you finna come into an eternal blessing. you know? So women not gonna go unscathed. And whatever, as a woman, you'll think, that the men are, there's a disconnect in the suffering of the women and the men. The men go through those sufferings, all right, on another level. And it's the same suffering, but it's on a whole nother level, man. Okay? With the responsibility of the churches. Like Apostle Paul, he was going through those things with the care of the churches, man. Still had to come and turn the camera on every day with them sufferings, man. We don't, the men, we don't get to retreat. No, we still gotta stand right here, man, in the midst of the furnace, man. Okay? So when you go back, jump down in Luke. All right, this is Luke 22 and 41. It says he walked away about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed, Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. Okay? Because there's points when you do just want to vacate. You do just want to dip out. Okay? But what if you do that? If we do that, then you take yourself out of the furnace too early, and you're not being completed. You're not going through the process of it, man. Because it's the process that's making us perfect. It's the process of going through the suffering, man, of having to wait, having to be patient, having to be disciplined, having to wait on the judgment of the Lord, man. Okay? Because we come see the whole thing that we go through now is conditioning us for Jacob's trouble. Okay? Because Elder Ariala always goes into how the preparation for war is way longer than the war itself. Okay? And we're being prepared for the hour of temptation. All right? Usain Bolt, all right, the fastest man ever. And he said something, that made a lot of sense, that we can relate to. Right? He said he trained 4 years, all right, for 9 seconds. Okay? He trained 4 years for 9 seconds. All right, because he trained for the 100 meters, okay, for 4 years, 4 years straight. But the race is only 9 seconds long. Okay? So he said he had to prepare his mind that 4 years to run a 9-second race, man. So we're being conditioned to go through Jacob's trouble, man. Okay, because Jacob's trouble ain't gonna be all right. Because we might suffer, brothers, sisters. You've been around for 5, 10, years or whatever. Well, Jacob's trouble ain't gonna be that long. You see, it's gonna be a thing of, it's gonna be quick compared to the time that we prepared for Jacob's trouble. So we're being conditioned to go through this moment. We're being trained up for this moment. Yahweh Shah was being trained up for the moment that he had to go through, okay, for the crucifixion. Okay? His whole life was preparing him for that. That's why he called hell, all right, from them niggas his whole life, man. He had to deal with the shame, being lied on, all these different things, man. Okay? So when it was time for the crucifixion, he was built up to go through it. Okay? And then he had a weak moment. But then you go to verse 43, it says, then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. Okay? Then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. Okay? So we have, help from on high, and this is why, we have the tools we need, the resources, the spiritual resources we need through prayer, through fasting, okay, from the brotherhood, you know, wise counsel. We have the resources that we need, okay, to endure, okay, the furnace, man. All right, and it says, verse 44 says he prayed more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood, man. It was a lot of pressure on Yahawashi. Remember, he had Yahawashi had every Israelite sin on him. You see, and the Heavenly Father was angry at Yahawashi for all of us. You see, he had to go through that moment. He couldn't retreat. He couldn't call down he had to go through that moment. All right. If Yahawashi, fell back, we'll be through. Okay? But he had to go through that moment, but there was a very intense moment. So we go through these intense phases, okay, within our walk so we can be built. Because we got to be built a certain way. Brothers got to be built a certain way. All right? You few sisters, you're going to have to be built a certain way for this, man. Okay? You see, to get to get that reward, we're gonna have to be built. We're gonna have to be proven. Okay, so this is the proving ground in this grace period. All right, and it says, verse 45 says, at last he stood up again and returned to the disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. Why are you sleeping? He answered them, get up and pray so that you would not give in to temptation, man. Because he got weak and he had to be strengthened. So he telling them, like, look, you gotta, pray and watch so you don't give in to the trials, man. Because it's constant trials that we go through, man. Whether it can be external trials, it can be, afflictions of the mind, afflictions of the body, that old man that we constantly battling. So there's always going to be an antagonist in this truth, man. And we have to overcome, all right, those antagonists by being in the spirit, man, looking at Yahawashi, and not thinking that we're going through something, okay, that no one else is going through. Like, nah, everybody got their different suffering, man. And if the Lord put you in somebody else suffering, you'll want your suffering back. You be like, God damn, you give me mine back. You see? So everybody, got their own suffering, but it's for each individual believer to be perfected, man. Okay? That's why you go through here, 1 Peter chapter 4. All right. All right, this is 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12. It says, beloved, think ye not strange concerning the fiery trial, all right, which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. This is part of it. So we can't look at it like, You know, and this is, you can't look at it like this is too much. It's unnecessary. You know, I shouldn't have to go through this. You know, like nah, we should have to go through it. Cause see, we're being chastened now, so we don't suffer with the world, as the scriptures say in Corinthians, man. So the Lord is he putting us through, you know, this rigorous furnace now, so we don't have to suffer when He get ready to judge the world. You see, because He's making us meet worthy, all right, for deliverance, man, for mercy. You see? So we're being chastened now, so we don't have to suffer with the world and what the world is about to go through. You think we going through something? Wait till we see the Lord's anger toward the 2/3 where He finna take these niggas through, man. Okay? Because He's taking us through the furnace, but He's with us in the fire. Just like YAHAWASHI was with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, He was with them in the fire. Okay? But he not gonna be with 2/3 in the fire. He finna put them niggas in there for destruction. They gonna feel everything. Okay? So we have to understand we're being chastened now. But hey, the Lord with us through the chastening, man. Okay? To make it through the other side, to come out unscathed, man. But refined. Okay? And um, it says, as though some strange thing is happening to you, but rejoice inasmuch as you are partakers of Yahweh suffering, man. And see, that's another level of this truth when you can rejoice in these things, man. You know, because there's sometimes when things happen, you know, people react, you know, you in the furnace and you know Satan jump on people, man. Sometimes, you know, I used to laugh at it, man. You know, sometimes I used to have like a real good laugh, man, because I know Yahweh looking down, he laughing at the situation. Are you catching hell? Like he looking down, like, you know, looking and laughing, man, because he putting that hell on you, man. And you know it's coming from him, but then you rejoice because that means he dealing. Because you'll find yourself like, damn, this is what King David was going through. Like, damn, this is what Yahweh you know, Joseph, this similar to Joseph. Like, damn, so we're in good company when we suffer for the sake of Yahweh, man. Okay, we're in good company, man. You know, and then it comes to the point you gotta rejoice and just embrace the situation. Yahweh had to embrace the cross. That's why he didn't talk to Pilate and them. He didn't have much to say. He just embraced the situation. He knew it was gonna be unfair. He knew they was finna lie on him. Okay, you see, he knew they were finna get their rocks off by torturing them. He knew these things, man, and he had to embrace it. Okay, but now he's at the right hand. He's perfected, and now he's just ready to be sent back, man. All right, to fulfill all things. Okay, so there's certain things in the furnace like just gonna have to embrace. It ain't gonna be fair. We wasn't sitting here to be fair. Yahushua wasn't sitting back for him to live a fair life, for him to get a fair shake. No, all odds are gonna be stacked against him. There's gonna be a lot of resistance. Okay, you see, he's gonna be portrayed in a particular way, and here it is. He's being tortured. Okay, he's been given up to be tortured by the Romans, by the people that he came to teach and preach and do miracles for, man. Okay, but he knew it was bigger than that moment. He knew it was bigger than the moment. He understood the bigger picture, man. Okay, that's why we can't get too caught up in the moment. We gotta stay, cause that's what it's when we go about when we talk about putting on the putting off the mortal and putting on the immortal. Remember, it begins with the thinking. See, we gotta think like immortals, so we can't get caught up in the you know, in the mortal way of thinking in these moments, man. You gotta think beyond this, man. You know, so when you read on, it says, um, verse 13 said, but rejoice in as much as you are partakers of Yahweh's suffering, that when his glory shall be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy, man. And when we're changed, at that moment when we're changed, you know, you got to understand we're going to be changed, man. We're going to have these new bodies, okay? Because the Lord, if someone, you know, if we're in a situation to where we're being wrong, you know, and we have to suffer wrongfully, the Lord gonna deal, all right, with the antagonist of the situation. You know, that's gonna be for sure. All right, that the scriptures say, you know, you can marvel, if there be one stiff neck amongst the people, it's a marvel if he go unpunished, man. If they go unpunished. So the Lord gonna deal with the antagonist, man. But we just have to focus on what the Lord is dealing with us, man. Okay, because the antagonist ain't gonna change. You know, you can sit around, you can talk about it for hours, and you can go through every emotion you gonna go through. That nigga gonna be the same once you get through. Okay, they not gonna change. They not gonna change. Cause it ain't meant for them to change. Cause they got a role to play. All right, to perfect us, man. Remember, all things work for our good. Work for the good for those. All right, chosen from the foundation of the world. Okay, Romans 8:28. So all things are working for our good, man. We have to remember that. But it's just a spiritual awareness, all right, to understand what's going on real time and to embrace it. Okay? So it says, verse 14, it says, if you be reproached for the name of Hamashiach, happy are ye. All right? And you see, people don't understand what we do or what we're a part of, but they want to make us suffer because of our conduct, because we're different, because we move different, we react different, we don't care about what they care about, you know. So people are try to, create some type of suffering, you know, in your life, just be based on your conduct. You know, they don't even have to know exactly what you're into, what you believe. But as we're being conformed more to Yahawashi, there's certain people that try to bring suffering to your situation, okay? Because, hey, we follow Yahawashi, man, okay? But if we're being reproached for behaving like Yahawashi, that's a blessing. We have to remember that, okay? It's supposed to be like that. That's part of the story, and that's part of what's being perfected. And it says, if you be reproached for the name of Yahushua, happy are ye, for the spirit of glory and of the Most High rested upon you, and on their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified. Okay? So we glorify Yahushua through our conduct, through our faith, through our long suffering, man. Enduring these things gives glory to Yahweh by Shemal Shah. You know? So we have to have a mindset like, nah, this ain't gonna break me. You know? Praying to Yahweh by Shemal Shah for the strength to endure. You know? And then, hey, it come a time when shit, you get in attack mode. You know? You learn, because pretty much once you learn the characters and their tendencies, these different characters around us and their tendencies, you know how to work around them, you know how to maneuver around them, you already know what they're gonna do, what they're gonna say, how they're gonna react, this and that. So you learn how to be proactive, man. And that's leveling up in this thing, man. you know? So let's go from there. Um, let's get this in the book of James, chapter 1. All right. And I started at 2. It says, my brethren, in James 1 and 2, it says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Okay? So we have to understand that when we're being tried, we're being tempted, we know why. It's based on our belief. It's based on us following Yahawashi. This is why we're in this situation. And see, when you in the truth, it seems like you go through situations with your hands tied because you're restricted on what you can do. See, in the world, you can just go off, the flesh. You can just react like that. Soon as you feel a certain type of way, you can just spaz out. You know, you can just get your own, look corruptible crown. You can execute your own judgment when you're not moving in your Yahawashi. But see, when you're in your Yahawashi, you have to apply patience. You have to apply discipline. You have to do things in order. Okay? So it seems like your hands tied. Okay? But that's because remember, when they put Meshach, Hananiah, Azariah in the furnace, they tied them up and put them in the furnace. Okay? But when they came out, they was loose. You see? But when they put them in the furnace, their hands were tied. They was bound. Okay? And that's how it is in these situations. Like you bound. You be wanting to get your own victory. You be wanting to, execute your own judgment on the spot. Okay? But the judgment be of the Lord. Okay? So when you keep going, it says, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience, it forces us to be patient. But let patience, this the point, but let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Okay? It says, but let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect, which is complete and entire, wanting nothing. So we have to go through every situation. We can't abort the mission. We can't cut it short. The Lord got to cut it short. You see, we got to go through that whole process so we can get all, we can so we can get everything that the Lord wants to show us out of each situation, man. All right. The reason why we be in situations that seem like it's long, because the Lord still is purging things out of us, man. All right. So when we come out the affliction, okay, we're the product that the Lord wants. All right, for the next phase, because the Lord take you through a furnace to build you for the next phase. Then He'll take you through another furnace to build you for another phase. Then another furnace is a constant cycle, okay, of leveling up in the truth, man. And we can't get around the process of going through that suffering, man. Okay, and it's perfecting us, okay, until we're changed and on the chariots, man. Okay, so I end it here with Hebrews 2. Um, it's Hebrews 2, and I read verse 10. I read the NLT. It says, the Most High, for whom and through whom everything was made, chose to bring many children into glory, and it was only right that He should make YAHAWASHI, through His suffering, a perfect leader, fit to bring them into their salvation, man. So YAHAWASHI's suffering made Him their perfect leader. Okay? You see, He was perfected through that suffering. He was completed. So we're going through that process. We're drinking of that cup of suffering so we can be completed to be fit joint heirs with Him, man. Okay? And the Lord has particular women going through particular things so you can be completed to be compatible with those men. Okay? So there's a suffering that's necessary. The bitters are necessary, man. Okay? And we're suffering with Yahawashi, all right, to reign with Yahawashi, man. We're following Him through His sufferings, man. You know? So, Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters edified. Till next time, and say Shalom. Kwam Yashala, Abba, Abba, Soon, Shalom.